I think that many of us would identify with the role of promoter of change. Certainly the World Academy and the World University Consortium aim and mission is to promote change. And so if we are scientists or health practitioner, I'm a psychologist and an organizational development expert, opinion makers or politicians or educators, but it would be enough to be a concerned citizen. I think it's really important that we are aware how our social and personal selves, I would say what I think about that in terms of definition, are socially construed. And that is important because then we could understand better how the present narratives serve us or actually hamper us, blind us in promoting the sustainable development and the development of human capital that is so dramatically needed. I think that human beings have been defined as the intelligent beings, mammalians, that create self-fulfilling prophecies. And individual and communities, culture, nation, construe their experience. We human beings do not live in reality. We live in a socially construed reality. But at the same time, the individual, Gary has many times, Giannani, underlined this, I fully agree, individual in turns is a dialectic, dynamic, in turn, change society and the way to construe. Rosa Parks sitting on the bus, that changed reality. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. Mahatma Gandhi, non-violence. Those are examples when an individual change reality. And society is affected. Although in India, they tell me, my Indian friends, Gandhi is more popular probably outside India, Nemo Profeta in Patria. So, just to give an example, it's certainly not an extensive treatment, but there are so many factors to take into account. Also, our biological, is our evolution that brought us to develop self-awareness and civilization, different from other form of life. But the way we live are very, very, very important, including nutrition. If you don't have enough protein when you're a baby, your intellectual power and capacity of learning would be strongly diminished. And I'm a psychologist, the psychological factor, the coping ability, but more than anything, as Carl Roger taught me, how I relate to myself, others, and the world. If I relate to myself in a defense, guarded way, and I'm at odds, a stranger with part of myself or some of my needs, of course I'm going to be threatened by any other human being that is different than me and my family. And of course I'm going to see enemy everywhere. And if I'm alienated from part of me, of course I'm going to relate in an alienated way to every human being. And I am in a wood, I don't appreciate the wonder of nature, but I see how many trees I can chop off and make toothpicks of various size and shape. The family factor. The role that my parents play are going to teach me what is to be a woman. It's going to teach me what is to honor my sexual and affective needs. Or they teach me that I have to castrate and separate from those needs because they're dirty and not belonging to a good girl or a good boy. The social-economic factor that I put also, not only the economic status, but access to education, what kind of education, the services, and the equal opportunity. And then the culture of fashion. You know, I spoke with somebody, Italian, but is working in, you know, development of countries like Africa and other countries, and she said that they have a very big problem with albino children, because the belief in some of those communities is that they are magic. And so the family protect and make every window of the house with bar, like a prison. And sometimes people elicit the curiosity of the albino kids, grab by the arm and cut the arm and sell it like rhino horns because there is magic powder. Can you imagine? You know, such a destructive belief. Was not more constructive the belief of Adolf Hitler and all the crazy idea of a pure race to extirpate Jewish people from this planet. Crazy belief abound. And the consumer practice and the availability of goods and services. And what kind? We eat, half of the world is starving, half of the world is obese. And what is in the food? What is food production? Environmental factors and the structure of society. The law, the regulation, of course, if it's a democracy or a dictatorship. So, following the seminal work of the people, two young researchers of Heidelberg University in '66 launched a new field, the sociology of knowledge. I suggested the reading of Berger and Luxman, the social construction of reality. They address not directly the issue of power, but how reality is structured. More power than this, what you want. And so, what we consider true, right, good, the behavior that we adopt, they are all influenced by the social, cultural, personal relations that we live in. And I don't mean it that it's like it's a brainwashing. I am not at all believing in a word as described by Skinner and the behavioralist. People have agency. As a matter of fact, the Academy and the World University Consortium are collaborating with Roberto Poli of the University of Trento, UNESCO chair, this April, just an international conference on agency. But people are not aware that we live in a reality that is socially construed. They believe that their reality is the reality. And foreigners that have a different culture, custom, and perception, they are barbarian. They are weird. They are wrong. Because they don't share the same epistemic reality. In my opinion, one of the many descriptions of power, I would see power as energy, the capacity to channel that energy to act and to impact. And power is not positive or negative. It's like breathing air and exchanging anhydride carbon dioxide with oxygen. You know, I breathe. That's not positive or negative. I need to breathe. But the life that I carry on that is thanks also to the exchange of air in my lungs, can be impacting myself and others positive or negative. The power is just the same. Power is not a dirty word, as in some quarters it seems that power, like money, is not dirty unless it's dirty. So, let me concentrate first, I'll do also some example of some positive variable that have sustainable results. And I underline results because good intention often have caused terrible results. To be intentionally good is not enough. You have to be aware of what you're doing and see the consequences. So, for example, the narratives that respect people and empower them, the capacity to communicate effectively and to learn from experience, the capacity to live in peace with your neighbor. Peace can only be incarnate. If I'm not in peace with myself, I cannot relate in peace with my neighbor and my close one. The capacity to have a sustainable ways and to prosper. I'm impressed that still today a friend of mine works with the Navajo Indian. There is a strong feeling in the Navajo Indian. My friend Barbara Williams said that works with them, to walk in beauty. To walk in beauty is about the existential depth that is a way of being. And to walk in beauty, it means to be walking aware of every living being. And so when they need to fell a tree, they tune themselves in with the tree and silently ask permission, because their world is an animated one, animistic, and if they don't feel the consensus of the tree, they will move on without killing the tree. If they hunt, they would ask the permission for the animal, saying that they need its meat, and it's okay that they carry on with the arrow. If they don't feel, and the interesting thing is they don't feel the permission of the tree or of the deer, of the hunted animal all the time, so they abstain from felling and killing. It's not that boom. They really try to feel if it's okay in their heart. Shall we talk about this with Shell Oil executive and Monsanto executive? Walking in beauty. So, the capacity to prosper and to respect the environment, human and natural environment. The capacity to include all the stakeholders in projects and change. The agreement, so means that it becomes mine, is an introjection on sustainable common grounds and rule. So, that is nice, but we cannot allow ourselves to forget also so many bad examples in history. We have too many to mention. Power is attributed and at times is acquired with cunning, but also with violence. And people acquire more power with propaganda and generate introjection and identification. One of these examples in recent terrible times was Goebbels' capacity for publicity, but also the Soviet empire, propaganda that was convincing while it was torturing and oppressing people, killing millions of people. In Europe, a lot of intellectuals and workers were convinced that the Soviet empire, that red fascism, was the land of opportunity, was a paradise on earth. And actually, I have some good friend in what was once the Communist Party in Italy that strongly believed until the Hungary invasion that Russia was the land of opportunity and equality for workers. You know, was a masterpiece of falsehood and of brainwashing, not for the people inside, for the people around the world. And still, in Italy, there is a fascism resurgent with, they don't call themselves fascist, and it's not only Italy. Look at Poland, Hungary. Look at the United States. The Republican candidate for the United States, I call that fascism. And are those the people the problem? No. I wanted to underline this for the purpose of this topic. Adolf Hitler was elected democratically by the people that wanted a strong man and a savior. Mussolini was not democratically elected, nobody's perfect, but he was strongly co-opted by the King of Italy and the economic powers because they thought, well, this guy is a wishy-washy socialist, anarcho-syndicalist. He can be easily used and we manipulate him, put the commie in check, the anarcho-syndicalist in check, and we would take over. It was a different narrative that he had in mind. So, one common ground, no matter if the dictatorship call themselves red or black, religious or atheist, they have a common ground. They forbid the individual, the citizen, to think with their own head. And they eliminate dissent, no matter what. But the means are the common means. It's torture, if brainwashing and indoctrination don't work. It's torture, it's death, painful death, and it's canceling the dignity of the individual. So, a lot of people have used power and have, often in the past, but in the present some remain, derived their power from direct incarnation of God on earth. You know, if you want a monopoly, you just say that with anything that you want, that's not just you, it's God. How you gonna bring God to court? By the way, I am born and raised in the Catholic tradition, and I don't know if you know that I like this Pope, by the way, Francesco, because finally he's sounding like a Pope. You expect him to say the right things. But a predecessor, Pius IX, had a lot of people disagreeing with him in the church and outside the church. And until then, the Pope was just the Pope. But he declared the Pope infallible, because it was not just the human being speaking up, but it was God, represented God on earth. So from then on, he eliminated any possibility of discussion. And, you had the Pharaoh of Egypt, the Caesars in the Roman Empire, but also all the dictators of recent time, they were semi-gods. So the question is how we construe our experience, how we create our narrative, and what kind of consequences this construction of reality. So the question is how we use the power. And in my opinion, is equal at the social and individual level. they are very intertwined. So, for example, one of the things that I work in is in education, and I was just saying that this in a relationship with what Herb was talking about. We don't have a common language. Unfortunately, I think it's true. That's one of the lacks. But we graduate. Education has been booming. Just Hater at the break was proudly, I think, showing how much education in Brazil has become multiplied in the number of graduates. And the UNESCO show us how much we have increased. But the real question is, we have grown in quantity. Have we grown in quality? If we are so happy about the educational opportunity, why we are not terrified how education make our expert, our opinion maker, our politician blind? Educated not to see, educated to impotency. I have an institute that trains medical doctor and clinical psychologists in 4 years postgraduate course to become a psychotherapist. And they've been coming from the best Italian university. Some come even from abroad, from foreign countries. There is no exception. My institute is also in other European countries, and I teach also in the States. It's always the same tragedy. And I show them what they have missed with their high-cost, expensive education by asking them to read a book by Fricio Capra, a bestseller, that in 1968 has sold 18 million copies. I call it a beach book. And it's the turning point. It shows basically in 68, the guy is a physicist, is a popularizer, and has written so many other books. But I have that book because nobody was born yet. And yet a housewife who knew what they did never learn in the university. I asked them to underline in yellow everything they were not taught at the university, and they came up amazed. The university made them blind to the obvious revolution that everything is relationship, discovered in the late 20s by the physics of Albert Einstein, Bohr, Heisenberg, etc. And then Bertrand Russell in the 30s, Carl Rogers in the 40s, the first systemic approach to promoting change in human beings. So, how are we going to talk about power without the talk about how society has been, in many cases, disempowering their best mind? Of course, then we are born in a family, we belong to a language, to a culture, to a society, and we have a social norm, we are rewarded and punished for what is right and wrong, and we belong to a consensus reality that is just the accepted belief, the cosmology of the time in which we take an observation. Of course, we cannot live in empty space, but we all live in a consensus reality. That's obvious. The interesting question is our consensus reality functional or dysfunctional? Because that is the name of the game, if we talk about power. Some example? Well, I read, I'm not an expert, that the Pueblo Indians self-destroyed themselves with over-cultivating the soil and didn't expect, that in consequence they flourished and they multiplied, there was more food. But then the drought caught them totally unprepared to deal with the events. It reminds me the world of today totally unprepared, apart from talking, about dealing effectively with the Anthropocene era self-created problems like the climate change, acidification of the sea, and the problems. For example, right now, my institute deals with the phenomenon of immigration in Italy and Europe. But, you know, people and other support for the Italian fascists to raise their voice, and the immigrants are the enemy. Oh, that's really funny. Italy has 28 million Italians abroad, in Brazil, in the United States, and we are screaming about the immigrants. We should be ashamed. We are so crazy. And, you know, those immigrants come often from war-torn situations that we Europeans created. First of all, with the drawing with the square and pen, the borders artificially, without thinking of the people who are living there and their culture and religion. And we are also blind, and this I think, I would be interested to know what scientists think, but you know, we need a little bit more awareness about how science is often very unscientific and full of bigotry, prejudice, racism. You know, we call it science just because a blind scientist says something, you know, has the authority to say stupid things, wrong things, false things. You want me to talk about a little bit around that? Well, there are a million examples, a lot of books. But just to give you an idea, you know, we had in the past, in the cradle of democracy and opportunity like America, scientists that were declining black, an inferior race. And also Crick, the famous guy from the double helix, was vocal about, because those scientists were so blind, and so stupid, and so racist, not to understand that if you give a test in the black wrap that those people that tested were using, they would flunk. But they were totally blind, and for years people were discriminated. Scientists or charismatic leaders went down in history as the father of modern psychotherapy. But if today they had the same idea, they would be under investigation by the ethical committee of their profession and kicked out. I'm talking about the idea, crazy, misogynist, that all women are affected by an untreatable condition, the penis envy. And what about the also false statement about homosexual and lesbian being sick people? That only in 1973 the American Psychiatric took away because they had no ground, scientific ground, to say such stupid, false statement, because since 57, 8, and 9, there were ample scientific evidence that was not true. Of course, homosexual and lesbian have a lot of problems, psychological nature, affective nature, even sexual nature, with identical percentage of heterosexual people. And so, since I'm finishing my talk, I'll go directly on the obvious. We need to be aware of all this. Awareness is power. And to have a future, we need to foster more people at peace with themselves, with others, and the world. In this way, I think it's useful to ask ourselves a powerful question. Are we part of the solution or of the problem? I hope that we are able to foster better, sustainable narrative. Thank you.